right, now we'll do it.
Radio check. Loud and clear.
KSL Sports and KSL Podcast present Mode Push, an American view of F1, starting now.
Don't stop. He's making cut with his honestly.
I'm gutted. I'm absolutely gutted.
I enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
All right, everybody, welcome on in. It's another edition of Mode Push, an American view of F1, your F1 podcast brought to you by two Americans who think they know what they're talking about with racing. And you know what? That's, I think, where we all kind of are, Dan. Everybody kind of, like right now, I don't know, I feel like I'm a pretty darn big expert after 7 years of, I can't believe that I've been an F1 fan and have religiously watched races for 7 years. That's what I'm surprised with. I usually give up on everything, and yet here we are.
Yeah, you're becoming an old timer in the sport.
Well, we've seen it all, and then as soon as we think we've seen it all, as soon as we think we know what the outcomes are going to be, they change. I think we all knew that at some point Red Bull would not have a perfect car forever. I saw reports of what it was when the smoke was coming off the back of Max's car. I think everybody in the entire sport was cheering. Some people were just straight up saying it. I think Martin Brundle was like, this is good for F1. You know, it was terrible to say, I know it's not good for Red Bull, but it's good for F1. And while the brakes are on fire. And I saw so many outlets say, oh yeah, engine fire. Usually when you see smoke coming out of the back of the car like that, it is. But did it end up just being that? Because when I saw the brake that had melted on that back right, was there anything else on top of it? Max got out of the car and was beyond furious. He was absolutely fuming at his guys, which I think in my mind I'd be like, hey, you guys perfect reliability, the most in the sport's history, and then that car goes on fire, and then he's upset at everybody, but he's a competitor. So the race that was in Australia, Dan, it started with Max going out in lap 4.
Yeah, it was such a strange issue. I can't remember the last time, if this has ever really happened in my memory. But yeah, he reported, I guess Red Bull was reporting that at the start of the race, literally when the lights went out, that the right rear brake caliper just locked on, and that it was just generating heat through those first 2-3 laps. But the question I have is if it was really locked on, there's no way he gets away and still stays ahead of the rest.
How does he have that? How does he have that speed for that entirety there? Because you let it even all the way until that very, very end there.
So it must have just been some sort of a malfunction where it was barely rubbing, or it wasn't releasing like he expected it to, because it seemed like he was having the issue in the corners, it was upsetting the balance of the car, which absolutely, if all of a sudden your right rear brake is braking way more than you expected, that's going to upset the balance of the car in the corner.
Sure.
And so he wasn't getting out of the corner fast enough, and then that allowed Carlos to get around him in the DRS section. So yeah, it's super strange. I saw a breakdown of how these brake systems are all built, and that they're able to inspect some of it and change out some of the parts between qualifying and the race. Under parc fermé, you can service the brakes a little bit, but you can't replace the whole brake assembly. And so it sounds like it just came down to a small little valve inside of there that just wasn't working correctly. And it just was rubbing or not releasing the way that it should have, generated too much heat, and then it just caught on fire. Once it catches on fire, there's nothing you do. It's good. You have to put put it out with fire extinguisher.
Sometimes
it's not going to put itself out.
Yeah, and there've been times, and this is one of those things where when you are new to the sport, and I remember a handful of times when they would do, specifically there was a restart. I remember Lewis was sitting there, and you'll see smoke kind of coming off of some of these cars, and sometimes their brakes do just straight up, they'll be on fire, and they're waiting for a start just so they can and then when we get going and it's 130 miles an hour, it's not that heat cools right down again. Is that real? Does that seem like something? I've seen those things sometimes where they're sitting there and he's brakes are on fire, and they're stand by, and as soon as they take off, then it's not a problem. It's a super weird line that they have to live on of trying to keep heat in those brakes and those calipers.
Yeah,
I mean we've all seen them hitting into those corners and those those brake discs just glowing bright red and orange.
Yeah.
And so you're going, there's thousands of degrees getting sent into those. And so you would have a lot of heat issues. It's surprising that they don't have even more.
Yeah, you'll see it like what you're referring to with like Lewis and stuff is, they have to get heat into those rotors on the warm-up lap, and then they come and they park, and while they're sitting there, you like 1300 degree rotor is starting to smoke. But as soon as they take off, the air is what cools the rotors. But I think what happened in the case of Max is it got so hot that other stuff caught on fire, like carbon fiber or whatever, the tire. I think like there was that clip where Max was pulling into the pit lane, and there was that like puff of black smoke. I think that was just the tire actually bursting from the heat, and it blew all the brake dust out. They had to get a fire extinguisher on that quick, because if you don't, the rest of the car is going to burn down. You don't want that to happen, obviously. Goodness. So just super strange. And I just really kind of wish that we could have seen if Ferrari had the pace to actually fight Max in that race, because there was all sorts of hype that they were, that like through the practice sessions, that they weren't having the tire deg issues that they had in prior races, and so they were actually going to be able to keep up with Max. And we won't know now because Max got taken out by a mechanical issue.
So with all of that, I know that we're just super sad about it, but it did end up being one of those races that immediately we were like, this is going to be amazing. And yet you had another car that just led from front to back, and that was an impressive performance by Carlos Sainz. I mean, I'm so happy for the guy, and I know all the storylines of whether or not it should be. You start to get the whole it should be Leclerc now who's losing that seat at Ferrari. Obviously, that's not the direction that they're going to go. I do know that the race got more interesting, certainly behind it. The George Russell crash at the very end that sent the Haas cars both of them into the points. They just were going to have one. I mean, first of all, the embarrassment of Mercedes being so far back, and then George like putting an effort together and doing what George does, which is kind of overdo it on almost everything. And he crashes on that third lap. Listening to his radio, it was just this desperation of, keep these points. Give me these points. Red flag. I'm on the ground. Red flag, I'm upside down. Like, he was just saying red flag so that they would just stop the race instead of, letting everybody pass him. You saw everybody going. Did F1 make the right call on that as they all started cruising by him?
Oh, man. Like, I see that clip, and, there's the one side of you where it's like, red flag it so that I don't lose my spot. But then also, like, I can understand if you're on your side and you get T-boned by Kevin Magnussen or whoever's coming around the corner, like, the cars are not designed to take an impact from underneath. They're designed to take impacts from the back, from the front, the sides. But from underneath, there's nothing there. It's like an aero floor, like it's carbon fiber, right? So I can understand that in that moment, he's feeling super exposed and coming around a blind corner that he just screwed up. I understand the panic in his voice. And I think that if, hindsight being 2020, I do think that they should have red flagged it immediately, but not, for the sake of saving, George's spot, but because I think it really was a dangerous situation.
Yeah. So explain to me, because, so let me just go through the Australian order and how we finished here, because it's great because it actually makes it to where, and we saw this at the beginning of the year. I don't want people to get too crazy about it, because remember, Checo last year was leading the championship for, a little bit of time because he'd won 2 out of the first 3 races, right? Doesn't that sound about right? And everybody was in Camp Checo going, he figured it out. And now you've got Max, who is a guaranteed first place normally, and now he loses out not just on some points, but the full 25 or 26 he probably would have gotten with the first place and the fastest lap. And so we have a race, or do we? That's my question, because Max is up on Charles by 4 points. Checo's got 46, so it goes 51, 47, 46. Sainz with 40. So that is a really, really tight race. A Red Bull 1, Ferrari 2, Red Bull 3, Ferrari 4. That's what we're asking for, right? When we look at you, like, I just am so nervous that it's not gonna turn out like this the rest of the way. But from the constructors' side, Red Bull's also only up by 4 points, and McLaren is not in that sphere yet, but it is obvious who the fastest teams are: Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, and I think the 1, 2, 3, 4 for Ferrari and McLaren respectively over the weekend is, I hope, something that we're going to see in the sport more, because McLaren, one, deserves to have that, because I think Oscar Piastri's freaking phenomenal. It turns out that Lando, is talented, but there's a reason that they signed up with Oscar Piastri. I love that Haas is in 7th right now, and they have 4 points. It might be the only 4 points they get the rest of the season, but here we are. There were so many things of that race, Dan. The post-race interview that was hosted by Gunther Steiner that was super weird. that was very fun.
Yeah.
And then after the race, the stewards look at the tape, and you tell me what you think about the ruling on Fernando Alonso and what they deemed was basically trying to set up George to hit that dirty air, to maybe get himself in a little bit more of an awkward position to crash, kind of a defensive move an offensive and defensive move by Alonso, who was in front of Russell. What do we take out of that? Explain maybe what had happened too.
Yeah, it's a very interesting case of how the stewards rule on this, because basically what happened was, going into the last lap, Alonso was getting caught by George, who was on pressure tires, and he's a wily old fox, right? Like, we know that he has a history of trying kind of some different racecraft moves to maintain his position or to make a pass. And so basically he admitted to the stewards afterwards that he intended to approach that corner differently to give himself an advantage up out of the corner. So he intended to come in slower and exit faster to reduce George's chance of overtaking him in the next DRS section. But when you look at the data, which the stewards have all the access, they know exactly what he was doing with that car at that point of the lap. We can speculate based off of some of the data that we get publicly that is very obvious. And when you watch the tape, you can hear it. You can see that he lets out of the gas and taps the brakes like 100 meters ahead of what he had been at every other lap that race. And then he does it so early that he has to get back on the gas and then hit the brakes again to get through the corner. So it was like he double pumped his brakes going in. And that the closing rate that George had on Alonso was so extreme that I think it did one of two things. I think number one, it just, the way that George was planning on getting through the corner all of a sudden had to change. So I don't know if he tapped his brakes. He obviously would have affected his steering input. But then also, when you get in so much closer, the dirty air off Alonso's car was going to upset the aero balance, and all of a sudden he's going to lose a bunch of grip. And what ended up happening is, obviously loses that grip, slides, and ends up in the wall. I don't think that it was Alonso's intention to wreck George. Obviously, I don't think he could have, I don't think he's that precise and that good to have forced that outcome. But I think it was definitely racecraft. It was a purposeful move that even he admitted to. But then how do you rule on that? Like, they gave him a 20-second penalty, which I initially thought was 20 seconds. Gosh, that's super aggressive. It only ended up being a 2-spot difference in the finishing order, with one of those spots being Lance. So in the end, it's kind of no net difference on the constructor points for Aston Martin. So I think I will be surprised if they appeal this ruling, because in the end, it's a 1-spot drop for Aston Martin. And you're probably like, okay, yeah, given what actually happened to George, it's probably fair. And it's dangerous, but I just don't know how you go about, like, as the FIA or the stewards, how you go about like judging people's racecraft. Like, oh, you should have driven that corner differently. It's like, well, he drove the corner how he wanted to drive the corner, and the outcome was, ended up being dangerous. But there's, 99 times out of 100, George probably makes it through that corner no problem, and just happened to turn out that way. So I think that kind of stuff probably happens a lot more during the races than we realize. We just know of, this time because it had such a dramatic outcome.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. Like, that's kind of racing though, right? Like, I mean,
yeah.
That's what I don't get. When you try to get in front of a guy, or that's the part. I mean, I guess the penalty comes from the danger part, right? And that's not because,
yeah.
But it's a really fine line, because what a weird Like when I go back and look at it, and then you do the whole, go back and look at his, look at all the analysis of all those numbers. Look at his ups and downs and when he's hitting his accelerator in that turn versus when he did it in the prior laps and all that. And they use that as evidence, and you're kind of like, well, yeah, because George was getting closer. And so I guess we look at it, it's the equivalent of, brake checking somebody, right? I guess on the freeway a little bit in layman's terms.
Totally.
So I guess, in the end, whatever. It ended up being another piece of the race that was just wild. I mean, just absolutely crazy. And after everything, we look forward to Suzuka in Japan. And I know that these guys, it's going to be a long season, and the drivers aren't super excited about 24 races. But, so far, this is a really promising start. Like, that's the way I look at it. I'm like, the teams are closer than we thought, and even closer to the Red Bull team than we thought.
Yeah. And I think that it'll probably be track dependent, but it seems like because of like the tire compound that was used at Australia and how the track works, like the tire wear was just different than the two Middle East races where we started. And that is what Ferrari is saying has closed the gap. So we could probably look forward into the races for the rest of the year and say, okay, where are we running softer compounds? Where's, tire wear not as much of an issue? And that's where we could expect Ferrari to be a lot closer to Red Bull. But I mean, I think, some folks have said it, like I expect Max to come out like gloves off in Japan and looking to lap the entire field because he was just so mad. It's first DNF in 2 years.
Right.
That's a pretty good record, but of course for him, that's unacceptable.
He did the thing in the garage where he comes, the engineer, and they're sitting there and they're kind of chatting. And he does the whole like pointing at the head, really like he's like, "What did you like? We got to figure this out," And then then he goes and presumably left the track early and went to go get on his sim to go on his Xbox. So in the end, there's a lot being made about this. How good is Carlos Sainz? Because I think a lot of folks look now and they go, "Well, that's a slam dunk pick for him to go over to Red Bull." Or is it? Like, he's been there before. Obviously, he's part of that junior driving program. Max used to be one of his teammates. Would that be something where, I mean, they would immediately be still a super contender, right? I mean, obviously it depends on what happens with Checo and whatever. But where does Carlos Sainz end up, and what did the win over the weekend do for his future?
Yeah, I mean, that's the top question that everyone's asking, because if you're Red Bull, 100% you'd take Carlos Sainz over Sergio Perez. But then you think, do we really want somebody competing with Max? Does Max leave? Max has threatened to leave already this year, and it doesn't seem like that's completely off the table. Toto said that the domino to fall that everyone's waiting on is Max, if he chooses to stay or leave at the end of the year. And so I think you have to be talking to Carlos. And if I'm Carlos, I'm like, I go to Red Bull. Like, I go win a championship. It gives me my best chances to go win a championship versus the other options of go replace Lewis at a struggling Mercedes, or go, be a driver at Kick Sauber for a year before it becomes Audi and have to get that team up to, standard.
Right.
I really hope he doesn't go that route, because I'll just be depressed.
It'd be a long
waste of talent.
Yeah, it's just a long road for that. And all these guys, all these guys feel like, oh, I would be Max, right, if I was at Red Bull, right? All these guys who are superstars are like, no, that could be me. It's just the car, right? I mean, I would assume, because they're all at the top of their game, and I don't know a group of athletes, and we were around a lot of athletes in my line of work. I don't know a group of athletes who are more competitive than those guys in the F1 seats. And that's a really crazy thing to think, right? Because there's an amount of ego that comes with that. There's an amount of talent, obviously. I don't know. Does everybody think that if they were in that Red Bull car, they could probably be the world champion? Oh,
for sure. I think everybody does think. I mean, even Logan Sargent probably thinks if I was in the Red Bull, I definitely could be fighting for races. It's the age-old question of, is it the car or is it the driver? And I think at this stage or like the highest level of motorsport, I think it does come down more to the car than the driver. But it's, nothing's a guarantee. It's going to be a wild, silly season for sure. And it sounds like everyone's still waiting on to hear what Max is going to do, and that Mercedes is still putting the full court press on him to come over. But I don't know why he would do that. I mean, Mercedes seems to be in a really tough spot. Double DNF. They don't have it figured out.
Did you see this news from today? This was just from today, out of Autosport, which I think is in. Is it just safe to assume it's probably in Germany or in the Netherlands? Like, it's probably Dutch.
Yeah.
I just had to hit translate. I didn't see exactly what the language was I was translating from. But Autosport says Aston Martin has made generous offer to poach Adrian Newey from the F1 rival Red Bull team. What are you shaking your head? I'm watching you shaking your head. Are you saying it's not going to happen? Or are you saying that would be wild because because Lawrence Stroll, I don't know if you know this.
Dude, Papa Stroll, man.
You roll all the egos together of those F1 drivers, you still don't equal what Lawrence Stroll's ego is. And the amount of money that guy has to be able to throw at a guy like Adrian Newey, who is looking for a fresh contract offer. Maybe, I don't know. How long is Helmut Marko going to be able to keep Adrian Newey there? Because everybody wants this guy's air designs. Everybody wants his car designs. Everybody wants his aerodynamics and his expertise. And he's maybe, aside from the drivers, the hottest person that every team would want to have on their side.
Yeah, he's the biggest asset in Red Bull outside of Max Verstappen. I shake my head just because, like, the respect I have for Lawrence Stroll to just be an absolute savage and just say, I have money and I'm going to buy a championship, and he's totally serious about it.
Yep.
So, I just laugh at the generous offer, reporting. Who knows what that is? And, is Adrian Newey at this point motivated by money? Is he motivated by a challenge?
Right, he's 65.
Is he just like,
He's 65.
Yeah, like, you're 65. What are you motivated by at this point? Right. And it would be wild if he did. I wouldn't put it. They've made incredible strides, and they're right now faster than the factory Mercedes team. They have a great driver in Alonso. I guess that's another seat we hadn't really thought about is, like, does Alonso shuffle over to Mercedes or to, one of these other teams, and then Carlos goes to Aston Martin? That's definitely a possibility.
Ooh.
And if they've got Adrian Newey designing their car for 2026, then man, that's probably would be my pick.
What's the perfect Red Bull team? Now that we know that Ferrari is going to be Lewis and Charles, what's the perfect Aston team and what's the perfect Red Bull team?
Max and Carlos, I think, would make the best driver pairing in the sport.
Because they've been teammates before, or like what? I don't know how well these guys get along.
Just raw talent. You look at, like, in the last year and a half, who's won races? It's three people. It's Carlos, Max, and Sergio a couple times. And arguably Carlos has been in worse equipment than the other two. So I think you got to give Carlos credit where credit is due. Like, he's taken advantage of the two opportunities that there have been in the last, season plus,
right,
of beating Max Verstappen when he wasn't having a great weekend. And
now, hold on a minute.
He's done it. So yeah.
Was Aston Martin? That's the old Force India Racing Point team.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Force India Racing Point.
Okay, so Checo already technically was on that team at some point.
Yes. Yep.
I don't know. Like, Alonso and Checo would be pretty fun. Alonso, but here's my perfect pairing. You ready for this? Carlos and Checo at Aston Martin. Lawrence fires his son, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And sends him to, I don't know, he makes some deal to send him. Who's the other Ferrari, or who's the other Mercedes powered car on the grid? Who's the other one?
It's Williams.
Okay. Well, okay. So I'm going to go Alonso, Checo, full Spanish-speaking team for Aston Martin. And then I'm going to go, I think Carlos and Max would be a phenomenal duo. But there's that little part of me that goes, give me Fernando and give me Max together. It feels like oil and water. It feels like it's too wild. But if you're Red Bull,
that would be great,
right? But you know what? Like, if Fernando's got a Red Bull powered car under him, like, I feel like he'd be right next to Max at the starts. You know what I mean? Like, and I know Max has become a wily, insane. He's on a different level than everybody, including Fernando Alonso. But I feel like There's a little bit of I don't know. I feel like Fernando has something a little bit more in his veteran world up his sleeve. That would be so fun for me. I know that this is all just wishes and dreams, but I don't know. It's a shame that Carlos is going to lose his seat after the reality is that he's the better F1 or the better Ferrari driver over the past couple of seasons.
Yeah. But if it lands him in a Red Bull or an Aston Martin with an Adrian Newey, he might be like thanking Lewis Hamilton, be like, gosh, I'm glad is Lewis going to be able to? Wild.
Is Lewis going to be able to wrangle that Ferrari, even if it is a little bit faster than that Mercedes? You gotta look on your face like it's a little.
I don't think Lewis. Yeah, I don't think Lewis will do any better than Carlos in that car.
I think he'll do worse. I think he's past his prime. He's become Tom Brady at 40-something years old. You've won them all. You're probably the GOAT, but at this point, you're just going to be hurting your reputation long term. I mean, the picture of you for Suzuka has you taking your fire suit off like it's a sexy pic. Come on, bro. I don't know. I don't know what the perfect pairing is.
He might win some races. I just don't think he's winning a championship. It probably just feels a lot like Sebastian Vettel at Ferrari, just kind of sunset of his career.
Yeah. I don't think he wins any races, to be honest. I mean, I don't know who he's beating. I don't think he's better than Charles. And then the rest of the field is going to be stronger. And if Aston Martin is going to be a faster team than the Works team, then you're going to be sixth place every race. If you're him, you're going to be third. You're going to get some podiums and maybe a win or two with Charles, and there'll be sixth up to fourth, and maybe a couple of third and second place podiums for Lewis. That's my prediction for him at Ferrari, and I'm sticking to it.
I think that's a good one. That's a good prediction. I agree.
Okay. I'm trying to think if we're missing anything here. Hey, with Suzuka coming up next weekend, tell me about Japan. This is one of those places that's always been kind of a mystery to me because the drivers love it. The drivers seem to love it. And the history of Japan and Suzuka is, I don't know, Brazil's a little bit like this too, where people are just like, what? I mean, this is just historical. It's just great. It's this awesome track. But what is Suzuka now? And I think that they're actually trying to figure out a different place for that race in the future, aren't they?
Yeah. I think it's on the potential chopping block. It's got history. It's a driver's track, like they say, but so is Spa. And like these two have been maybe some of the more boring races in the last few years because just the way these cars work, it just doesn't enable. It's more of like a single line racetrack. It's a single driver line, and it's just really hard to pass unless it's under DRS. And it seems like this year that the DRS is less powerful than it was last year. We're not really seeing guys like actually to be able to execute passes easily when they get within DRS. And so, I hate to say this, but my optimism isn't super high for a very exciting race in Japan. My money is on just complete domination by Max, unless he runs into another issue. But I mean, it's a cool track to drive on the sim, and I'm sure then it's therefore really fun for the drivers in real life. But it's just like, fast S's and straights, and just not a lot of tire wear. Let's hope for maybe another magical DNF that pops up somewhere that makes the running order interesting. But who knows? We don't really know yet how close Ferrari is to Red Bull, other than we think that they're a lot closer than they have been. So maybe we'll get a clean race and see how they compare straight up.
I did see something that the chief mechanic, Lee Stevenson, is going to leave Red Bull after Japan. What kind of an impact would that have?
Oh, I'm just hearing that. That's interesting. Chief mechanic. I wonder if he's taking the sword for that issue. But those guys have had such an impeccable, reliability record.
Right.
That you hate to see somebody lose their job after one mistake. That's interesting. It's like kind of more of the same of Red Bull, just kind of a little bit of chaos in the garage area. Seems like maybe the Christian Horner stuff is all like tamped down, and like there's no more question there on what's going to happen with him. But I think there are repercussions and just kind of carry on effects from all of that stuff.
I'm reading the actual post. Actually, you know what? We could probably actually listen to this. What if we go back and actually listen to what the mechanic says? Because I think that there's like a little bit of there's something going on here, and because he says it says it's been an incredible journey. One that I'm very proud of. What we've achieved has been monumental. I would have never fathomed since 2006. This is the end of Part A. Part B of my life starts on Monday. Thank you all once again. Keep pushing. And then, you ready for this? Black heart, dark green heart. Is this the Aston Martin takeover?
You go to Aston?
I don't know. Let's.
He must be going to Aston.
It has to be. I don't know.
Oh, that's spicy. I love that.
Well, here it is.
And here's the thing too.
Anybody's. I was just gonna say,
go
I've got the audio here, but I don't know how good it is. Hold on. Let's see if we can. Let me see if I can pull this up. But I'm doing this on the fly, so let me bear with me here. But let's take a listen, and you tell me if you can hear it too.
Hi everyone. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good day. Just thought I'd hop on here just to let you all know that you won't be seeing any more posts from me from Red Bull. Because today's my last day. So it's been an amazing 18 years, and all the things that I've managed to achieve here with the team has just been absolutely incredible. Working on the first car over here, which is RB2, and then RB16B, and then obviously the 19. It's just been an incredible journey. I just want to say thanks to everyone here. It's been an amazing time that I've had here. In 2006 when I started, I never thought we'd win races, get poles, win championships, but we've managed to do all of that, and it's just been amazing. So yeah, on to the next chapter. That chapter starts on Monday when I fly to Japan to start work with my new team at the other end of the pit lane. It's going to be a massive challenge, but one that I'm ready for.
That's where he left it. So you tell me, because it's green and black. I can't tell what color green. It's not like the. When he says at the other end of the pit lane, then you're talking about.
It's got to be Sauber, right? It's got to be Sauber. If he's saying it's the other end of the pit lane, I mean, and what he means by that is that they stack the order of the pit lane based on where you finished in the championship the prior year. Yeah. So Red Bull's the very end, or no, Red Bull's very first. Red Bull's very first, right. And then the very end is Sauber.
Right.
So I bet it's
Sauber. Where did Aston finish last year? 4 or 5?
I mean, yeah, so middle. So I mean, he might be exaggerating, saying other end of the pit lane,
right?
To make it feel less competitive. But yeah, this is spicy because if anybody knows, like, what is it about that Red Bull that's making it work, it's going to be the chief mechanic. Like, the person in charge of putting the car together is going to have the know-how. So yeah, that's a big loss. And it's interesting. I feel like sometimes with these guys, like, they've got like non-competes where they have to take what do they call it, gardening leave, like take a year off, and so that your information is a little bit more dated. They're letting him go. They're letting him go and work at the next Grand Prix with this team. That's freaking wild. Yeah, so it must be Sauber, because they're like, good luck, man. Like, try to get their pit stops below a minute. Like, they're not going to feel threatened by Sauber. But if it were Aston Martin, that's a big deal. That'd be
different. Okay, you know what? There you go. And then if Adrian Newey ends up at Aston Martin, then boy, then it does get fun.
I love it.
Then every weekend does get more fun. Oh my goodness! There's, you know what? On the fly, breaking news. We get to play it during the show. That's not a bad.
That's great.
That's not a bad deal there, Dan. Okay, we are going to put this one on hold, and then we'll get you ready for Suzuka next week, of course. And we've got so much more to talk about this crazy season here. So for Dan Jimenez, Dan, awesome job as usual explaining some things that are hard for me to understand as the F1 dunce still, even after 7 years, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
There you go. For Dan, I'm Alex. We'll catch you next time, everybody. Download the podcast, subscribe, tell a friend, teach a neighbor about F1. We'll see you next time, everybody.